Saturday, April 26th, 2003. Aron Ralston was having a perfect day. Blue skies, red rock canyons, the kind of solo adventure he lived for. By 2:45 p.m., everything changed. A boulder shifted, his arm was crushed, and he was alone in one of the most remote corners of Utah. What followed was 127 hours of hell that ended with a decision no human should ever have to make. Aron Ralston was 27 years old, an experienced mountaineer and outdoor enthusiast who'd climbed dozens of Colorado's highest peaks. He was the kind of person who craved solitude in nature, who found peace in the wilderness where most people found fear. That Saturday morning, he left his apartment in Aspen, Colorado, and drove to Utah's Canyonlands National Park. His plan was simple: a solo canyoneering trip through Blue John Canyon, a narrow slot canyon carved through red sandstone by millions of years of erosion. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. No note, no itinerary left with friends. His phone stayed in his truck. In 2003, cell service in the Utah backcountry was non-existent anyway. Aron was confident, self-reliant, and experienced. He'd done this kind of thing 100 times before. What could go wrong? The hike started beautifully. The desert air was crisp and clear. The canyon walls glowed orange and red in the morning sun. Aron moved through the narrow passages with practiced ease, climbing over boulders, squeezing through tight spaces, rappelling down drop-offs. This was what he lived for: the solitude, the challenge, the pure, raw connection with nature. At approximately 2:45 p.m., Aron entered a particularly narrow section of the canyon. The walls closed in on both sides, creating a passage barely 3 feet wide. He approached a chalk stone, a boulder wedged between the canyon walls about the size of a large tire, weighing roughly 800 pounds. Chalk stones are common in slot canyons. Climbers routinely scramble over them or shimmy past them. Aron had navigated hundreds. He placed his left hand on the left wall for balance and reached up to grab the top of the boulder with his right hand. As he pulled himself up, the boulder shifted. It happened in less than 3 seconds. The massive rock dislodged and dropped, pinning Aron's right hand and forearm against the canyon wall. The impact was crushing, bone-breaking. The weight was impossible. He tried to pull his arm free. It didn't budge. He tried to push the boulder. It was like trying to move a mountain. His hand was completely trapped, crushed between 800 pounds of sandstone and the immovable canyon wall. The pain was instant and overwhelming. But worse than the pain was the realization. He was stuck. Completely, utterly stuck. And no one knew where he was. Panic set in first. Aron screamed. He cursed. He thrashed against the boulder with everything he had. Nothing worked. The rock might as well have been welded in place. After several minutes of useless struggle, he forced himself to stop and think. Panic wouldn't save him. He needed a plan. He took inventory. He had a small backpack with minimal supplies. 350 milliliters of water, about 12 ounces. 2 burritos, a few snacks, a cheap multi-tool knife, a headlamp, a small video camera, a climbing rope, and that was it. No phone, no communication device, no one expecting him home for days. The first night was the longest of Aron's life. As darkness fell, the temperature in the canyon dropped dramatically. Desert nights are brutally cold. He had no sleeping bag, no jacket thick enough for the freezing temperatures. He shivered violently through the night, his trapped arm throbbing with relentless pain, unable to sleep, unable to move, listening to the absolute silence of the canyon. It was the kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, that makes you hear your own heartbeat, that that drives people slowly insane. When dawn finally broke, Aron began trying to free himself systematically. He tried using his climbing rope to create a pulley system to lift the boulder. It didn't work. He tried chipping away at the rock with his knife. The blade was dull, and the sandstone was like concrete. After hours of scraping, he'd barely made a scratch. He tried everything he could think of. Nothing worked. By Sunday afternoon, his water ran out. This was when the real horror began. The human body can survive weeks without food, but only days without water. In the dry desert heat, dehydration happens fast. His mouth became dry. His tongue swelled. His lips cracked and bled. Thinking became difficult. On Monday, desperation forced a terrible decision. Aron began drinking his own urine. He'd urinate into his Camelback water bottle and drink it. It was warm, bitter, and nauseating. But it was liquid. It kept him alive for another day. Then, another. As the hours turned into days, Aron's mind began to play tricks on him. He hallucinated. He saw people who weren't there. He had conversations with family members thousands of miles away. He used his video camera to record goodbye messages to his parents, his sister, his friends. Speaking into the camera, his voice weak and cracked. He apologized for not telling anyone where he was going. He told them he loved them. He said goodbye. By Wednesday, Aron had accepted that he was going to die in that canyon. His body was shutting down. He carved his name, birth date, and what he assumed would be his death date into the canyon wall with his knife. Aron Ralston, 1975 to 2003, R.I.P. It was his own tombstone. But Thursday morning, something changed. Maybe it was delirium. Maybe it was survival instinct kicking in one last time. But Aron had a revelation. He'd spent 4 days trying to move the boulder. What if he didn't need to move the boulder? What if he moved his arm instead? The thought was horrifying. But it was also possible. If he could break the bones in his forearm, he could bend his arm at an unnatural angle and potentially pull it free. Then he could cut through the soft tissue. The idea made him sick, but it was the only option left. Aron tested the theory. Using his body weight as leverage, he threw himself against his trapped arm, trying to snap the bones. The pain was excruciating. The bones didn't break. He tried again and again. For an hour, he slammed his body weight against his arm, trying to break the radius and ulna bones. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of agony, he felt a crack. Then another. The bones broke. Now came the part he'd been dreading. The cutting. Aron pulled out his multi-tool knife. The blade was dull from days of scraping rock, but it would have to work. He began with the soft tissue. Skin first, then muscle. The pain was beyond description. There was no anesthesia, no numbing, nothing to dull the sensation of cutting into his own living flesh. He had to pause every few minutes to keep from passing out. The worst part was the nerves. When the blade touched the nerve bundles in his arm, the pain was electric, shooting up through his shoulder and into his brain. He screamed. He cried. But he kept cutting. There was no other choice. It was this or death. After nearly an hour of cutting, Aron finally severed the last piece of tissue connecting his forearm to his body. His hand came free. For the first time in 127 hours, he could move. He was lightheaded from blood loss, weak from dehydration, and missing his right hand. But he was free. Aron knew he wasn't safe yet. He was miles from help, severely injured, and losing blood. He used climbing webbing to create a makeshift tourniquet above the amputation site, to slow the bleeding. Then he began moving. He climbed out of the narrow canyon section, rappelled down a 65-foot cliff face using only one arm, and started walking. Every step was agony. His vision blurred, his legs trembled, but he kept moving. After walking about a mile through the desert, he encountered two hikers. They were shocked. A man covered in blood, missing his right hand, stumbling toward them like something out of a nightmare. They immediately called for help. A rescue helicopter arrived within the hour. Aron was airlifted to a hospital in Moab, then transferred to a larger facility in Grand Junction, Colorado. Doctors were amazed he'd survived. The amputation had been crude, but effective. He'd lost a significant amount of blood, but not enough to kill him. He was severely dehydrated and malnourished, but he was alive. In the weeks and months that followed, Aron's story spread around the world. News outlets called it a miracle. Survival experts called it a testament to human willpower. Aron himself struggled with what he'd done. The psychological trauma of cutting off his own arm haunted him. But he also felt something else. Gratitude. Gratitude for life, for survival, for a second chance. Aron was fitted with a prosthetic arm. He returned to climbing. He returned to the outdoors. He even went back to Blue John Canyon. This time, he told people where he was going. He carried communication devices. He learned from his mistake, but he never stopped adventuring. In 2010, his story was adapted into the film 127 Hours, directed by Danny Boyle and starring James Franco. The film brought Aron's story to millions of people worldwide. It became a cultural touchstone about survival, resilience, and the limits of human endurance. Today, Aron Ralston is a motivational speaker, author, and advocate for wilderness safety. He's married, has a family, and continues to climb mountains. The arm he lost in Blue John Canyon is still there, somewhere under that boulder. He never tried to retrieve it. For Aron, it's a reminder of what he sacrificed to survive and a symbol of the price of underestimating nature. His message is simple but profound. Tell someone where you're going, always. It's advice born from 127 hours of hell, a lesson paid for with flesh and bone. Aron Ralston's story isn't just about survival. It's about the terrifying power of the human will to live, even when living requires the unthinkable. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible true stories of survival, resilience, and the human spirit. Thanks for watching.